As the camera lights flickered on and the studio buzzed with anticipation, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett entered the so-called arena of political debate, carrying with her a dossier of evidence that few others knew about, much less expected to see in such a heated confrontation. Her every step was deliberate, her demeanor composed, but beneath her calm exterior lay a steely resolve fortified by facts and unwavering principles. Across from her sat Levin, a seasoned conservative commentator whose reputation for fierce and aggressive rhetorical style was well earned. As soon as he caught sight of Crockett, he wasted no time in casting doubt on her comprehension of the Constitution, snapping, "Congresswoman, people like you don't understand what the founding document truly mandates." His words were sharp, designed to unsettle, to provoke a reaction that would make her seem uninformed or misguided. But within just a matter of minutes, what started as a confidently delivered assault on Crockett's credibility turned astonishingly into a moment where Levin found himself utterly speechless, shaken deep within, his confidence eroding before the eyes of the viewers. What transpired in that brief span of time was nothing short of remarkable, something that might forever alter the landscape of political debate. The sequence of events that unfolded next sent ripples through the studio, leaving everyone present in stunned silence, and perhaps even influencing future discourse on a broader scale. The moment was so impactful that it deserved to be noted, analyzed, remembered as a turning point in how political confrontations could potentially unfold when facts and composure collide. In the tense atmosphere that marked the beginning of their exchange, the energy was thick and tangible, almost as though the very air in the studio had thickened with anticipation. This was no ordinary political talk show, no casual discussion about policy. It was a high-stakes clash of personalities with starkly contrasting worldviews, Crockett representing a sturdy, principled approach rooted in legal expertise and social justice, while Levin exuded bravado, armed with sharp, often provocative remarks designed to undermine her position. Their rivalry was well known, especially since Levin's persona was built on an aggressive style of argumentation, with biting retorts that had become a staple of his broadcasts for weeks. Tonight, however, they were finally brought together in the same physical space. In this studio, simultaneously, a battleground and a stage. The host, sensing the mounting tension, began with a cautious, perhaps slightly nervous introductory remark. "Welcome back, everyone. Today we're going to witness a debate featuring two prominent figures, conservative commentator Levin and Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, as they discuss the controversial House Bill No. 1742. His voice, however, barely finished carrying the words before Levin interrupted with his trademark style, abrupt, pointed, and full of bravado. Without hesitation, he launched into his usual attack, repeating with renewed vigor, "Congresswoman, let me reiterate, people like you just don't understand the Constitution." Crockett, however, remained remarkably composed. Her expression was steady, her face betraying no frustration or anger, only calm confidence. But her eyes, sharp and purposeful, flickered with contained determination. She reached out, retrieving a folder from her bag, a collection of documents, notes, and perhaps even specific legal references, prepared to counter the baseless accusations and misrepresentations that Levin had been propagating. Her voice was even, measured, yet carrying an unmistakable undertone of readiness. "You've been taking shots at me for weeks, Mr. Levin," she said, with unwavering calm. "Tonight, I've come prepared. I've brought evidence, receipts, that will clarify the facts and shed light on the truth behind my positions, my background, and this bill that we're about to discuss." Her words carried weight, not only because of what she said, but because of how she prepared herself to confront the relentless barrage of attacks with facts and clarity. Unlike many who would crumble under such pressure, Crockett's reputation as a former civil rights attorney, an expert in law and justice, only strengthened her resolve. She had swiftly climbed the ranks within political circles, gaining recognition for her razor-sharp legal mind and for her unwavering commitment to justice. She was no stranger to opposition. She had faced it head-on, often with resilience and meticulous preparation. Yet, over the past month, Mark Levin's attacks on her had grown increasingly personal and hostile. His rhetoric had started to cross lines that many would consider unacceptable in polite discourse. As a popular broadcaster with millions of followers across social media platforms, Levin had successfully turned Crockett into a target, questioning her credentials, her legal expertise, and even her patriotism during countless nights on air. His audience loved his confrontational style. It built viewership and stirred emotions. But what many viewers did not see was the quiet, ongoing effort Crockett had undertaken behind the scenes. She had collected evidence, crafted responses, and prepared herself for the moment when she could finally set the record straight. Levin, on the other hand, was well aware of her reputation as a formidable legal mind and a principled fighter for justice. His tactic had been to dismiss her as superficial, to paint her as someone more concerned with image than with substance. Still, his relentless assault had a clear strategic purpose: to discredit her credibility and sway public opinion against her. As he raised his voice with practiced indignation, he continued, "Let me tell you what I think of Congresswoman Crockett. She embodies everything that is wrong with today's political climate, full of hype, short on substance, and entirely focused on appearances rather than real policy solutions." The stakes in this confrontation could not have been higher. This was clearly more than a simple debate about a legislative bill. It was a battle for truth, reputation, and political integrity. Underneath the surface, what was truly at play was the controversy surrounding House Bill No. 1742, a piece of legislation that carried profound implications for voting rights across the nation, affecting millions of citizens. For weeks, Levin had dismissed the bill as unconstitutional trash, condemning it in the most vehement terms. His narratives echoed into his audiences, and his influence was widespread. Crockett, however, was ready to respond, her voice steady and unwavering. "Let me make this clear," she said calmly, but with conviction. "I've been listening to your misrepresentations, your inaccuracies, about my positions, my legal background, and the bill itself, for quite some time now." Her words served as an assertion of her own authority, and an invitation for viewers and opponents alike to consider the true facts. The host, observing the unfolding exchange, shifted uncomfortably in his seat, sensing the intensity of the moment. "Perhaps," he suggested cautiously, "we should focus on the actual content of the bill, rather than personal attacks." But Crockett was not about to let the discussion slip away into mere accusations. "Oh, indeed," she replied softly but firmly. "I intend to do just that." Her voice conveyed that she was prepared to unravel the layers of misinformation and present her version of reality: facts, legal reasoning, and clarity, laying bare the truth behind the controversy. What was to follow would be a battle of substance, wit, and conviction, a show of strength and knowledge that might resonate far beyond the studio walls, sparking conversations and possibly shifting perceptions on an issue that affected the very foundations of democratic rights and justice in the United States. Before diving into the main discussion, I believe it's important to provide some background for the viewers, offering clarity about why Mr. Levin has been so intensely focused on attacking my personal integrity rather than engaging with the core issues of the legislation under debate. This shift in tactics might seem peculiar at first glance, but it's essential to understand the context behind his behavior. The scene opened with her deliberately opening a carefully prepared folder, from which she pulled out a substantial stack of documents. Each paper was neatly organized, clearly indicating the effort put into verifying and preparing her evidence. This visual was meant to underscore the seriousness of her arguments and to demonstrate her readiness to back up her points with concrete proof. Levin, on his part, had made some rather audacious claims about my understanding of constitutional law, assertions that seemed designed more to undermine than to contribute to the substantive discussion. And yet, it appeared he was engaging in a strategy of personal discreditation rather than a thoughtful critique of the law itself. The audience could sense that he was trying to provoke a reaction, perhaps hoping to deflect attention from the real issues by attacking my credibility. Levin smirked slightly at one point, his expression carrying an air of overconfidence, clearly not expecting me to respond with much substance. His attitude suggested he felt secure in his position, perhaps convinced that personal jabs would be enough to sway public opinion or distract from the inadequacies of his legal knowledge. I responded calmly, asserting, "I merely speak the truth, Congresswoman." Her composed reply was that her record stood as testament to her integrity and expertise. She nodded slightly, a faint smile appearing on her face, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. It was more a gesture of acknowledgement than of triumph. Her expression subtly conveyed that she was well aware of his tactics and that she was ready to hold her ground. As these exchanges took place, the atmosphere in the studio began to subtly shift. The usual feeling of predictable political theater was giving way to something more tense, more authentic. The production team, sensing that something unusual was occurring, instinctively prepared for a different kind of segment. They quietly instructed the camera operators to ensure they captured every reaction, every subtle movement, understanding that this exchange might reveal more than just partisan posturing. Continuing the discussion, I addressed my background openly. Before I was elected to Congress, I spent many years defending the fundamental constitutional rights of ordinary Americans in courtrooms across the country. With this, I paused briefly to emphasize the depth of my experience, then asked, "How many constitutional cases have you personally argued, Mr. Levin?" My question was straightforward, but aimed at underlining the disparity in legal experience between us. The answer, or rather, the hesitation, flickered across his face, betraying a sense of uncertainty. It was clear that this particular line of questioning veered from the expected script and caught him somewhat off guard. As the segment progressed, his initial attacks grew more aggressive, but they also became increasingly personal and, frankly, more cutting in their tone. "You're an amateur at best when it comes to constitutional analysis," he criticized. "I've authored books on constitutional law that are used in law schools nationwide," I stated calmly, maintaining my composure despite the provocation. My steadiness seemed to irritate him even further, fueling his desire to escalate the rhetoric rather than address the substance. The split screen provided the audience with a direct visual of his reaction, his face tense and flushed next to my steady gaze. It was a visual reminder of the growing tension in the studio, signaling a real debate rather than mere political posturing. Then, in a more pointed tone, I addressed him directly. "Mr. Levin, I have here transcripts from your own show, in which you repeatedly misrepresent the implications of the 14th Amendment in relation to this bill." She pulled out the first document from her folder and highlighted sections of the transcripts with a visible marker. These passages clearly showcased his errors when discussing constitutional law, highlighted phrases that he had mischaracterized or misunderstood. The camera briefly zoomed in, capturing the highlighted texts in sharp contrast, underscoring the evidence being presented. Levin immediately responded, "Those extracts are taken out of context," his voice rising in frustration. "You're playing games with some of the most serious constitutional principles we have." His defensiveness was palpable, and it only served to reinforce the sense that he was not engaging with the facts, but instead trying to deflect and cover up mistakes. The host attempted to intervene, signaling a desire to steer the conversation back to more productive ground, but I pressed on quickly. Perhaps we should move on, but I am happy to provide the full context. I continued undeterred. In fact, I have archived the complete broadcast with timestamps to ensure full transparency. With confident movements, I tapped another document, which contained analyses from 3 respected constitutional law professors, each noting the same errors I was pointing out. Levin's face darkened further upon seeing these references. His next attempt at attack was dismissive. "Who are they? Left-wing academics pushing some sort of agenda?" he asked disparagingly. I responded calmly, sliding another sheet of paper forward to reveal the names. Among those named was Professor James Williamson, who had been featured on his own show as an authority on constitutional law. "Professor Williamson isn't left-wing," I pointed out evenly. "He's a well-respected scholar with a reputation for impartiality, and he's explicitly criticized your misinterpretations." Sensing that the situation was shifting, the production team subtly signaled to the director through a whisper in the earpiece, encouraging him to let the segment unfold rather than cutting it short for commercial breaks. The tension was palpable, and it seemed clear that this exchange was exposing a deeper gap in expertise and sincerity. Finally, Levin changed his approach again, adopting a more strategic tone. He proposed a shift in focus, asking, "Then, let's turn to your record in Congress. What exactly have you achieved besides grandstanding and stirring racial tensions?" His tone was overtly provocative, meant to weaken her credibility. My eyebrow lifted slightly at his latest provocation, signaling that I was prepared for this maneuver as well, convinced that the truth would prevail regardless of distractions. The term race baiting, a phrase that carries quite a heavy connotation, was used by Mr. Levin, and it struck Crockett as a deliberately provocative choice of words. She recognized the potential for such a phrase to derail a serious discussion, but decided to respond thoughtfully rather than react defensively. As she prepared herself, she carefully pulled out a document from her folder, a symbol of her readiness to delve into facts, figures, and legislative details. Meanwhile, the atmosphere in the studio was thick with tension. Over the past month alone, Levin had labeled Crockett as unqualified no fewer than 17 times on his show, a barrage of accusations that seemed designed to undermine her credibility in the eyes of the audience. Additionally, he had questioned her intelligence 12 times, repeatedly challenging her abilities without ever mentioning her academic background, a law degree earned through years of dedicated study, nor her distinguished career as a civil rights attorney, nor any of the numerous legal victories she had achieved throughout her professional life. These omissions suggested a pattern. His criticisms targeted her person rather than her policies or achievements. The mounting pressure was evident as the segment progressed. In the background, a production assistant could be seen, clutching a phone and exchanging rapid messages, likely updates on the viral social media reactions already beginning to swell, reflecting the digital audience's engagement and response. Crockett's observation was sharp. While Levin criticized other members of Congress for lacking qualifications, he had at least acknowledged their policies or voting records. In her case, however, the criticism was always personal, and, she thought, implicitly biased. She wondered what lay behind this persistent focus on her individual character rather than her legislative work. Levin's face twisted with visible anger when he responded. He accused her of implying that he was racist, framing such an accusation as a common tactic in heated debates, an emotional outburst designed to cast doubt on his motives. "Are you suggesting that I harbor racist beliefs?" he demanded. He seemed to believe that labeling critics as racists was a powerful weapon when facing loss in an argument. Crockett remained composed, replying evenly without rising to the provocation. "I have not implied anything of the sort," she said calmly. "What I am doing is simply presenting facts." She pointed out that her treatment by Levin was noticeably different from how he had interacted with her colleagues, emphasizing that the transcripts of their exchanges clearly reflected this disparity. At this point, Crockett finally addressed the core of the discussion, House Bill 1742. She asked Levin whether he'd like to switch to the actual legislative content or continue with the personal accusations and attacks on her character. The host, sensing the mounting tension and the potential for the situation to spiral out of control, attempted to steer the conversation back to the bill itself. "Let's focus on the legislation," he urged. "Congressman Crockett, could you explain why this bill matters?" But Levin was not ready to relinquish his confrontational stance. His irritation boiled over as he dismissed her efforts to redirect, calling her approach ridiculous and accusing her of misrepresenting his motives and motives of her opponents instead of defending her legislation. Crockett, however, remained unshaken. Her voice stayed remarkably steady and composed as she responded, "Actually, I am more than willing to discuss the bill. That's precisely why I am here." She pointed out that, for weeks, Levin had focused his attacks on her personal character rather than addressing the substance of her legislative proposal. "I thought it was important to clear the air first before moving forward," she explained. Turning her gaze directly into the camera lens, she clarified her position. House Bill 1742 is aimed at safeguarding the fundamental right to vote. The essence of this legislation is straightforward and clear. Despite what Mr. Levin may be telling his viewers, this bill does not impose restrictions or qualifications on who can vote. Instead, it guarantees that eligible voters are not unfairly removed from the voter rolls without due process or proper notification. Her tone was measured, emphasizing transparency and fairness. Levin attempted to interrupt, attempting to cut her off with a protest that he disagreed with her interpretation. But Crockett pressed on, undeterred. "And if we are to have an honest discussion about this bill, I believe the audience deserves to understand that Mr. Levin has repeatedly misrepresented both the content of the legislation and my own legal expertise." She made her points clearly, highlighting that his portrayal of the bill was inaccurate and that his claims about her qualifications did not align with her professional background. Her calm logic contrasted sharply with Levin's increasing agitation. Sensing the mounting online engagement and realizing that the segment was attracting significant attention, something likely to extend beyond the studio and into social media realms, the host announced that they would need to pause briefly. "We will take a short break now," he said, "but we will continue this enlightening discussion when we return." As the cameras faded to black, Levin could be seen, off camera, reaching hurriedly for his notes, clearly thrown off balance by Crockett's unexpected and poised rebuttal. Meanwhile, Crockett sat serenely, meticulously arranging her documents in preparation for the next phase of the debate. When the broadcast resumed, the host addressed the viewers directly. "The response to this segment on social media has been extraordinary. It appears that many of you are very interested in this debate." The palpable excitement and curiosity among the audience suggested that Crockett's approach had made a significant impression, and the conversation was far from over. Levin immediately launched into the next round of argumentation, eager to regain his offensive edge, while Crockett prepared herself to further clarify her position, confident in her facts and her integrity amidst the storm of controversy. During the commercial break, I took the opportunity to carefully review some of these so-called transcripts that have been circulated recently. Upon closer inspection, it became painfully clear that they are deeply misleading and distort the context of what was actually said. These transcripts tend to extract individual phrases from the conversation and then manipulate them out of their original context, weaving a narrative that does not accurately reflect the reality of the discussion. Such selective editing creates a false impression, presenting a distorted version of the events that is far removed from the truth. Crockett, observing this, allowed herself a slight smile, recognizing the tactic for what it was, a deliberate attempt to mislead. That's exactly why she had taken the precaution of bringing entire, unedited video recordings along with her, rather than relying solely on these misleading transcripts. She wanted the full truth to be evident to anyone willing to see it clearly. Would the other party like her to simply play the raw, unedited clips? She was confident that the producers could arrange for that without any difficulty. Her hint was quite clear. When given unfiltered footage, the distortions evident in the transcripts would be obvious to all. The control room, already in a bit of a state of hurried scrambling, responded unexpectedly, revealing that this wasn't part of any planned segment, nor was it a typical approach. But what mattered was that the ratings were skyrocketing, soaring higher than anyone could have anticipated, making the decision to proceed with unrestricted clips a strategic, if spontaneous, move. The producer, signaling approval to the host, nodded firmly, indicating that they should proceed accordingly. The host, momentarily caught off guard and visibly flustered, managed to compose himself and addressed the audience, saying that they could certainly show a brief clip if it proved relevant to the discussion. Crockett, without hesitation, confirmed its importance, replying with conviction that it was very relevant. With this, she handed a small flash drive to an attentive production assistant, who quickly hurried off camera to retrieve the footage. Meanwhile, Levin's face betrayed the first unmistakable signs of genuine concern. A hint of apprehension flickered in his eyes, a rare display of unease. These clips were more damaging than he had anticipated, and he knew it. Crockett, observing his reaction, was not shy about voicing her disdain for what she considered the theatrics of the moment. She described the display as ridiculous theater, emphasizing that their primary purpose was supposed to be serious policy discussion, not entertainment or manipulated spectacle involving selectively edited clips of her show. She clarified her point, asserting that she was presenting unedited footage, not selectively edited snippets, in an effort to elevate the level of truth in the debate. She pointed out that her goal was definitely to engage in meaningful discussions about policy, a subject she had been trying to address for weeks. However, she accused her opponents of diverting from serious dialogue by incessantly questioning her intelligence and qualifications instead of focusing on substantive issues. Crockett's words cut sharply through the tension in the studio. The production assistant soon returned, nodding in agreement to the director, signaling that the footage was ready. Moments later, the large studio screens flickered to life, displaying a clip from the politician's show, an episode aired exactly 2 weeks earlier. As the footage played, Crockett's words rang true. Congresswoman Crockett, she claimed, would not recognize the Constitution if it hit her square in the face. The clip showed Levin, in a tone of blatant disrespect, stating, "She's completely unqualified, utterly clueless about the law. It's embarrassing, folks. Truly embarrassing." The clip concluded, and the screens returned to the studio, revealing Levin's now visibly uncomfortable expression. Crockett, watching this, observed that the footage was only 2 weeks old, highlighting how recent and relevant the criticism was. Then, she shifted gears, presenting another clip. This time it was of Levin himself, discussing a particular senator's position on a virtually identical voting rights bill from the previous year. The second clip began playing, revealing Levin speaking in a notably more measured and respectful tone. He acknowledged that he disagreed with Senator Richard on the specific approach to the legislation, but emphasized that Richard was a serious, responsible legislator, well-versed in constitutional matters. Levin's words underscored that disagreements could be based on good faith differences, without casting doubt on a colleague's patriotism or dedication to the country. The The stark contrast between the two clips was impossible to ignore. Even the host seemed momentarily taken aback by the disparity. Two lawmakers, who held similar positions on the issue, were being treated in dramatically different ways, a point that Crockett summarized succinctly. This was far from an isolated incident. She made it clear that such selective treatment was a recurring pattern, not a one-off. Then, about 20 minutes into the live broadcast, after enduring a steadily increasing stream of increasingly desperate attacks from Levin, Crockett decided to address the mounting hostility directly. He had repeatedly called her delusional, incompetent, and a disgrace to Congress, a barrage of personal insults meant to undermine her credibility. Calmly, she reached for the final document in her folder, prepared to respond. She looked directly at him and addressed him by name, his number 11 on the list of her notes. Before she responded to that last jeering comment from him, she took a moment to speak carefully. Addressing the entire audience, she said, "Mr. 11, before I respond to that last attack, I think it's important to clarify something. 3 days ago, on your show, you made some serious claims about me, and I believe it's only fair to set the record straight." She shifted slightly in her seat, visibly composed but unwavering. She then cited his statement, what he claimed about her, making it clear how troubling and unfounded it was. "You claimed that I, and I quote, don't understand the very basics of constitutional law, and that I have never even handled a significant constitutional case. Furthermore, you said that I am simply a fraud, elected solely through identity politics, and that my so-called accomplishments are non-existent. But what many viewers saw during that segment was a clear demonstration of how empty and unfounded your accusations are." At this point, silence fell over the studio. Even the host seemed momentarily unsure of how to proceed as the weight of Crockett's measured rebuttal settled in. The atmosphere grew tense, the kind of quiet that often follows a bold assertion when everything else around seems to pause in anticipation of the next move. "That is quite a remarkable assertion regarding my professional background," Crockett continued, her tone composed, yet carrying an unmistakable edge of conviction. "In light of this, I have brought along something that I believe will be of keen interest to both you and the viewers watching this program." With deliberate movements, she reached for a document, and the camera swiftly focused its lens upon it. The viewers could see clearly that this was an official court filing, one that pertained to a significant voting rights case from approximately 5 years prior. She explained, "This document is from the case known as Harrison versus State Election Board, a legal dispute that marked a turning point in voting rights jurisprudence." She elaborated further, noting that this case became a legal milestone, setting a new precedent for how states could implement voter identification requirements. In fact, the Supreme Court referenced this decision only last year in a major ruling. Before she could finish, Lean, attempting to interject with a comment or response, was gently but firmly interrupted by Crockett, who pressed forward to establish her point. "What truly makes this evidence compelling is that you have, on multiple occasions during this very program, discussed this case, regarding it as one of the most influential voting rights decisions of the last decade," she pointed out, sliding the document forward so that the cameras could capture it without any ambiguity. "You have expressed admiration for the legal strategies employed and the reasoning that led to the outcome achieved." She directed the camera's lens onto the document, providing a clear view of the details. "If you look closely at the lead attorney responsible for crafting the constitutional argument in this case, the one whose work you have praised repeatedly, you will notice a name familiar to you." The camera zoomed in once more, highlighting the attorney of record, Jasmine Crockett, whose name was clearly visible on the legal filing. "That's right," she continued, her voice steady, as faint murmurs from the production crew off-camera indicated shock or surprise. "I was the lead constitutional attorney in this case. the one who developed the fundamental legal argument rooted in the provisions of the 14th Amendment that ultimately formed the backbone of the court's decision. She paused momentarily, allowing her words to resonate, then added, "The very same amendment that you claim I fail to understand." The studio grew silent, the atmosphere turning tense. The host's mouth opened slightly in surprise, unable to find immediate words. However, Crockett was not finished. "This is not an isolated incident," she went on. "Before I even entered Congress, I was involved in a total of 7 major constitutional cases that went beyond the initial trial stages." She arranged the documents carefully on the table in front of her, ensuring they were clearly visible to viewers. Of these, 3 were taken to federal appellate courts, and 1 was even cited in a decision handed down by the Supreme Court itself. With deliberate care, she continued, "So, when you tell your millions of viewers that I lack the legal qualifications or experience necessary to handle significant constitutional cases, what you are doing is not just an insult to me. You are actively and deliberately misleading the audience." Her words had a sharp edge, aimed straight at the falsehoods being spread. Levin's face visibly drained of color upon hearing her statements, and for perhaps the very first time in his career as a broadcaster, he seemed genuinely at a loss for words, unable to respond immediately. Crockett, maintaining her unwavering composure, pressed on. "I do not expect an apology from you," she remarked calmly. "But I do believe that your viewers, those millions of people relying on your program, deserve the truth." She took a moment to emphasize her point. "Throughout my career, I have dedicated myself to defending constitutional rights in courtrooms across this country. I have often succeeded in challenging laws that unconstitutionally restricted access to voting, a fundamental right guaranteed by law." Finally, regaining his composure somewhat, the host shifted his gaze to Levin and asked, "Would you like to respond to this new information, Mark?" Levin, clearing his throat and visibly struggling to find his footing, attempted to speak but hesitated, clearly overwhelmed. I wasn't aware of your involvement in that particular case," he finally managed to say. "But that changes everything," Crockett interrupted firmly, her voice clear and unwavering. "It exposes the fact that your attacks on me have never been motivated by concerns over my legal qualifications or my understanding of the law. Instead, they are personal, targeted, and, above all, deliberately misleading." She directed her gaze straight into the camera, making her final point explicit. "And that's why this matters, because, Mr. She paused, emphasizing her words. "Public trust hinges on honesty. Misrepresenting someone's qualifications and past achievements not only discredits the individual, but also misleads the audience, potentially influencing public opinion based on false premises." Throughout the course of recent debates, Levin had repeatedly mischaracterized my professional background by insisting upon baseless claims that I lacked any valid or credible legal experience. With such unfounded assertions, he attempted to dismiss the entire substance of House Bill 1742, deliberately avoiding any meaningful engagement with its actual provisions or the concerns it aimed to address. Instead of confronting the essence of the legislation, Levin seemed to rely on these false accusations as a tactic to sidestep the substantive discussion. Yet, as the proceedings unfolded, he made an effort to recover from this misstep, emboldened perhaps by a desire to maintain his image. His attempt rested on the idea that, because he had once been involved in a single legal case, that somehow equated to having experience comparable to having litigated multiple significant constitutional matters. However, Crockett was quick to set the record straight. She clarified that the number of cases she had argued, specifically 7 major constitutional cases, far surpassed the one case Levin casually mentioned. Every one of these important legal battles had been meticulously documented and could be referenced here and now. They not only demonstrated her extensive experience, but also illustrated her deep familiarity with constitutional law and court proceedings. Her record of legal advocacy was, in fact, more substantial than that of most members of Congress who had ever litigated cases in courtrooms. This contrasted sharply with Levin's casual and somewhat superficial reference to his own limited legal involvement. It was a direct and pointed correction that exposed the disparity between their actual experience and the misleading claims he had made earlier. The moment was visually captured on camera, and viewers could clearly see the change in Levin's demeanor. His expression shifted rapidly, from initial confidence to a mixture of surprise, obvious embarrassment, and a growing sense of distress. The bravado that he previously displayed was rapidly dissipating, replaced by signs of discomfort and a realization that his attempt at disparagement had failed to hold up. His usual assurance, which apparently had been a cornerstone of his approach, was now visibly evaporating under the pressure of coherent facts and pointed rebuttal. At this juncture, Crockett took the opportunity to steer the conversation toward the actual substance of the bill. She asked plainly and directly, "Would you like to discuss the real constitutional implications of House Bill 1742? Or would you prefer to continue attacking my qualifications with claims that you now recognize are false?" Her tone was measured but firm, signaling her confidence that the focus should now shift to the legislation itself and away from personal attacks. Levin, visibly caught off guard, and perhaps realizing that the game of misinformation was no longer effective, responded in a much more subdued voice than before. He admitted, somewhat quietly and with less bravado than earlier, "I think we should discuss the bill." Crockett nodded in acknowledgement, affirming that her intention was precisely that, for the conversation to shift toward the policy and its implications. She expressed her understanding that the audience, the viewers watching this debate, deserved a serious and substantive discussion about laws that directly impact their rights, rather than hearing about misrepresentations and falsehoods designed to discredit her. The atmosphere in the room altered noticeably, with the dynamic between the participants becoming more balanced and focused. For the first time in the exchange, Levin appeared diminished, his earlier arrogance now replaced by a less confident posture as Crockett sat upright and authoritatively presented her case. Her arguments, based on facts and constitutional precedent, had driven home her point most convincingly. The host, sensing that a moment of historical significance was unfolding, made an effort to restore order and refocus the discussion. "Well then," the host proposed, "let us now turn our attention to the specific provisions contained within House Bill 1742. Congresswoman Crockett, could you please explain the fundamental components and key elements of this legislation?" Without hesitation, Crockett responded, having already set aside the documents that had once dramatically shifted the tone of their debate. Her voice was clear, confident, and purposeful as she began her explanation. She outlined that the bill addressed three major areas of voting access, areas that had become problematic in recent elections, raising concerns about fairness, transparency, and the security of the electoral process. As she explained, her words flowed with clarity, referencing specific legal precedents related to constitutional rights. Some of these precedents came from cases she had personally argued before the courts, demonstrating her hands-on experience and deep understanding of the legal landscape surrounding voting rights and election law. Throughout her presentation, Crockett's mastery of the subject was unmistakable. Her command of constitutional principles and legal nuances sharply contrasted with Levin's earlier dismissive and superficial comments. His previous attempt to belittle her expertise by claiming she lacked experience was now starkly refuted by her detailed and authoritative exposition concerning the bill's provisions and constitutional grounding. After she completed her explanation, the host turned to Levin with a direct inquiry, seeking his perspective on the specific provisions just discussed. Struggling to compose himself, Levin began to voice his concerns. He did mention, with a faint voice, that he still had reservations regarding what he perceived as federal overreach in Section 4 of the bill. According to him, this section mandated a notification process before individuals could be removed from voter rolls, a requirement he claimed was problematic. Crockett promptly responded, emphasizing that the Supreme Court had consistently upheld such notification requirements as constitutional measures, citing relevant legal rulings. One such case, Davidson v. Election Commission, which Levin had previously discussed on his own program, was brought into focus. In this case, the court explicitly deemed notification a minimal and reasonable burden that serves to protect fundamental voting rights. As the exchange continued, it was evident that Levin's discomfort grew. Yet, Crockett persisted, pointing out that the funding mechanism proposed in the bill was essentially the same as the one employed in the bipartisan election security bill he himself had supported 3 years earlier. She completed her thought by offering the texts of both bills for comparison, should anyone wish to examine whether they contained similar provisions. Meanwhile, the production team in the background was signaling desperately to the host, indicating that attention on social media platforms was exploding with reactions, opinions, and commentary regarding the intense and revealing exchange taking place on the debate stage. This sequence of events had not only clarified the substantive legal and constitutional issues embedded in House Bill 1742, but also exposed the superficiality of some opponents' claims and the importance of relying on facts and law when discussing legislation that profoundly impacts citizens' rights. In the days following the televised debate, the impact of the exchange between Congresswoman Crockett and Levin rippled across all corners of the nation, capturing public attention like a wildfire spreading through dry grass. Online, hashtags such as Crockett Receipts and Levin Exposed began trending relentlessly across social media platforms, quickly becoming part of the everyday digital conversation. The buzz was not confined to small niche forums. It surged through mainstream channels and dominated the online discourse, making evident that many viewers truly appreciated the clarity and firmness with which Crockett dismantled Levin's arguments. The host of the show openly acknowledged this phenomenon, expressing a sentiment that resonated with many. "We are witnessing an enormous response from viewers," he admitted during a follow-up segment. His words reflected a broader sense of surprise and acknowledgement that something unusual, yet significant, was unfolding in real time. "Many viewers are telling us they've never seen this particular side of these issues so clearly articulated and driven home," he added, emphasizing how the debate had struck a chord with people seeking honest, straightforward discussions on contentious topics. Levin, responding to the mounting pressure, made a last-ditch effort to regain his footing in the intense verbal battle. He launched a final counterattack, attempting to shift the narrative back in his direction. His words were full of bravado, asserting that the selective way Crockett had presented her arguments did not change the basic facts. Levin claimed that Crockett's side of the story was wearing thin in the eyes of her own supporters, who appeared increasingly skeptical of her claims. He emphasized that he had diligently documented his qualifications, exposing the misleading assertions Crockett had made during the debate. Furthermore, he insisted that he had methodically addressed each major point Crockett raised concerning the bill, supplementing his responses with precise legal citations. Despite the personal jabs and insults directed at him, Levin maintained a composure that many observers noted as professional, though some wondered whether frustration was evident in his eyes, perhaps glittering from the studio's bright lights or from internal agitation. It was evident to viewers that Crockett perceived this final effort as a sign that her opponent's position was crumbling, concluding that the audience could judge for themselves who had relied on facts and who had resorted to personal slights. The immediate aftermath of the broadcast was both swift and far-reaching. Within just a few hours, short clips capturing Crockett's systematic dissection of Levin's arguments began spreading rapidly across all major social media networks. These snippets showcased her sharp, well-founded rebuttals, moments that garnered millions of views and shares, quickly becoming viral sensations. The incident soared to the top of trending topics nationwide, with "Crockett takes down Levin" ranking as the #1 trending discussion, capturing the attention of a diverse audience eager to see what many called one of the most pivotal political confrontations in recent broadcast history. Major news networks promptly picked up on the story, dedicating segments and panels to analyze every detail of the heated exchange. Political commentators from across the ideological spectrum offered their takes, debating the significance of Crockett's victory in this verbal duel and what it might mean for future public debates on critical issues like voting rights. The consensus among many was that a new chapter had begun in how such debates were conducted, more focused, more fact-based, and less susceptible to personal attacks. On the following morning, the story's momentum continued to grow. 3 prominent newspapers ran front-page headlines boldly proclaiming Crockett's decisive role in exposing Levin's false claims and highlighting her dramatic confrontation. Headlines such as "Crockett reveals the truth," "Levin's claims crumbled," and "The evidence is clear. Crockett changes the conversation on voting rights" captured the essence of the event with compelling language. These articles detailed not only the televised showdown, but also the implications of her success in shaping public discourse. The receipts, an unmistakable record of her factual corrections, served as concrete evidence of her meticulous approach and strategic clarity, reinforcing her reputation as a formidable advocate for her causes. The repercussions extended beyond the immediate political sphere, affecting Levin's public speaking and broadcasting schedule in a most unusual way. For the first time in many years, his radio program was abruptly pulled from the airwaves, taking a break that lasted for 2 full days, an extraordinary pause for a host typically known for his consistent presence. While radio silence persisted, social media activity from Levin also diminished sharply. His accounts, which usually pulsed with numerous daily posts and commentary, remained eerily quiet, allowing his audience to wonder about his state of mind and the impact of the confrontation. When he eventually returned to broadcasting, listeners sensed a clear shift in his tone and approach. The bombastic certainty that had often characterized his style was noticeably absent. Instead, a more measured, subdued voice took its place. Levin openly acknowledged that reasonable people could have differing interpretations of the Constitution, a significant departure from his previous, more rigid, absolutist stances. While he did not directly mention Crockett's criticisms, his words suggested a recognition that he himself had blind spots in his understanding, and that respecting the expertise of others, regardless of their political affiliations, was essential. This more nuanced stance represented a striking evolution from his past rhetoric, hinting at a potential shift in his perspective prompted by the debate's intense exposure. For Congresswoman Crockett, the event proved to be transformative on a personal and professional level. Overnight, she became a recognized figure nationwide, with her office inundated by interview requests, invitations to participate in discussions, and calls from various news outlets eager to hear her views. Her prominent role in the debate cast a spotlight on the substance of House Bill No. 1742, which until then had garnered limited public attention. Now, for the first time in a long while, serious consideration and debate focused on its provisions and implications. Remarkably, 3 conservative lawmakers previously opposed to the legislation publicly announced their reconsideration of their positions, an indication of the profound influence Crockett's articulate defense had on shifting the political landscape surrounding this bill. In essence, that televised exchange had catalyzed a broader political and social shift. It demonstrated how a sharply conducted debate, rooted firmly in facts and reasoned argumentation, could alter public perceptions and even influence legislative perspectives. The ripple effects continued to unfold in the days that followed, signaling a possible turning point in the ongoing dialogue about voting rights, constitutional interpretations, and the nature of political discourse in contemporary America. After hearing the Congresswoman's comprehensive and carefully articulated explanation of the constitutional principles underpinning the proposed legislation, an observer remarked, "I believe this issue warrants a much closer and more meticulous examination than it has previously received." This statement reflected a growing sense that the debate surrounding the bill was beginning to shift from superficial discussions toward a deeper, more substantive analysis rooted in legal and constitutional considerations. In the days leading up to this moment, political commentators and analysts had noticed a notable change in the way voting rights were being portrayed and discussed across various media platforms. Prior to the contentious encounter between Crockett and Levin, the discourse was predominantly characterized by heated, often partisan shouting matches, where the primary focus was on political loyalties and ideological posturing, as observed by seasoned commentators who have followed these debates for years. However, following this confrontation, there was a discernible movement toward a more nuanced conversation, one that concentrated on the legal frameworks, constitutional rights, and detailed legislative language shaping voting access legislation. Perhaps most encouraging from a public perspective was the evidence of increased support for the provisions contained within House Bill No. 1742, an important piece of legislation proposed in the House. Paired with the improved tone of discourse, polls indicated a marked rise in the number of citizens who now expressed backing for these specific measures. When ordinary people were presented with clear and straightforward explanations of the bill's actual content, stripped of partisan rhetoric, they often found themselves aligning with its fundamental protections and principles. This phenomenon was noted by a polling analyst who stated that, without the partisan framing, many individuals realized that they actually agreed with the core protections embedded within the legislation. Approximately 2 weeks after this heated exchange, Crockett received an invitation to participate in a bipartisan working group tasked with refining and clarifying the legislative language of the bill. She responded publicly, emphasizing the importance of this opportunity. "We now have a genuine chance to find common ground on how best to protect voting rights, all while addressing legitimate concerns about how these policies will be implemented." Her words reflected an optimistic outlook that cooperation and compromise could be achieved amid the ongoing political debates. When she entered the meeting room designated for the initial session of this bipartisan working group, a journalist asked whether she had spoken with Mark Levin following their previous confrontation. Crockett answered simply, "Yes, I have spoken with him. We had a productive and private conversation." She added that beyond that, she believed, "Sometimes the most meaningful growth comes from facing our most difficult moments of truth." Her tone suggested a conviction that even conflicts and disagreements could serve as catalysts for constructive development and understanding. Later that same day, Mark Levin posted his first direct comment on social media regarding the earlier confrontation. His message conveyed a newfound humility and openness. "Sometimes being proven wrong is the beginning of getting it right. I am listening more and shouting less these days. Maybe we all should be doing that." His post resonated widely and quickly went viral, prompting political analysts and media observers to comment on a broad and perhaps unforeseen shift taking place in the national political conversation. Many noted that this marked a rare instance where the discussion pivoted from spectacle and personal attacks toward a focus on substantive issues supported by facts and honest debate. A well-known columnist remarked that, "What we have witnessed is a moment where substance has triumphed over spectacle, a sign of potential change in the way we conduct political discourse." The central question now was whether this shift was simply a temporary anomaly, a momentary recalibration, or if it signaled a more enduring transformation in the manner in which political debates and legislative discussions are conducted across the country. Meanwhile, within the offices of Congress across Washington, D.C., congressional staff members observed a noticeable change in how their legislators approached criticism and evaluation of opponents. It was no longer seen as prudent to make sweeping accusations without thoroughly understanding the backgrounds or qualifications of the individuals involved. An aide commented discreetly that nobody wants to be the next Mark Levin, emphasizing that legislators and aides alike were now diligently doing their homework. carefully scrutinizing the backgrounds and credentials of those whose claims they were tempted to challenge publicly, to avoid unnecessary missteps and reputational damage. For her part, Congresswoman Crockett continued to prioritize the substance of her legislative efforts concerning voting rights. She explicitly stated in an interview that the confrontation wasn't the main point, emphasizing that her primary goal was to redirect the focus toward the actual issues and challenges faced by voters. It was about encouraging people, she explained, to pay attention to the underlying policies and principles at stake rather than getting distracted by personalities or partisan bickering. Support for her stance was especially strong in her constituency. During a town hall meeting, one constituent praised her for her principled stand, remarking, "She didn't just defend herself. She stood up for the idea that facts matter more than rhetoric, and that expertise, regardless of who possesses it, deserves respect." This articulate championing of truthful and evidence-based debate resonated with many ordinary citizens who believed that meaningful progress depended on a focus on tangible facts rather than mere political posturing. As the discussions around key provisions of House Bill No. 1742 began to garner bipartisan backing, political scientists introduced a new term to describe this phenomenon: the Crockett effect. They defined this as a growing emphasis on debate that prioritized substantive engagement supported by verifiable facts, rather than resorting to personal attacks or unfounded assertions. This emerging trend reflected a broader cultural shift, one where public discourse might be becoming more honest, more focused, and more respectful of expertise and truth in the legislative process. 6 months had passed since the intense confrontation that had captured the nation's attention, lingering in the minds of many as a defining moment in recent political discourse. It was within this time frame that Mark Levin, perhaps surprisingly to some, decided to make a move that defied expectations and added a new chapter to the unfolding story. Instead of continuing the heated rhetoric or dismissing his opponent, he extended an unexpected gesture. He invited Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett to join him on his televised program. In his introductory remarks, Levin openly acknowledged their differences, emphasizing that we disagree on many things. Yet, he expressed genuine regard for her, pointing out that her legal expertise and steadfast commitment to constitutional principles deserved recognition and respectful engagement. This approach reflected an understanding that meaningful conversations often arise through dialogue with those who challenge our preconceptions, forcing us to reconsider our positions and deepen our understanding. Levin valued the potential for such exchanges to generate more insightful and constructive discussions, rather than remaining trapped in cycles of hostility. The ensuing conversation between Levin and Crockett was noteworthy for its civility and depth. Unlike previous arguments marked by personal insults and inflammatory rhetoric, their discussion was grounded in mutual respect. Both participants maintained focus on constitutional interpretation, engaging thoughtfully with each other's points rather than attacking personalities. This dialogue, characterized by its seriousness and substantive content, resonated strongly with viewers and resulted in record-breaking ratings. It also served as a clear illustration of the emerging shift towards a more mature and respectful mode of political debate, one that prioritized ideas and principles over inflammatory soundbites. As clips from their interactions circulated widely across social media platforms, a particular comment captured the spirit of many viewers' sentiments. It read, "I never thought I'd see the day when facts and expertise mattered more than volume and insults." This statement encapsulated a growing hope that perhaps there was room for a more meaningful political conversation, one where reasoned arguments and credible evidence could take precedence over shouting matches and personal attacks. The story of Jasmine Crockett's influence extended beyond that single confrontation. It became a symbol of how substantive discussion could challenge the prevailing spectacle-driven culture of modern politics. Her willingness to stand firm on facts demonstrated that truth and knowledge could prevail over sensationalism. Her methodical responses, backed by evidence, contrasted sharply with earlier moments of bravado or reckless rhetoric. Crockett's silence in the face of insults coupled with her ability to produce concrete receipts, be it legal documents, verified data, or relevant case details, served as her most powerful weapon. In a landscape often dominated by theatrics, her example underscored that substance, when wielded effectively, could turn the tide against superficiality. This narrative also conveyed a broader message, that the true strength of political discourse lies in credibility and expertise. Instead of matching volume with volume or engaging in tit-for-tat insults, presenting clear, tangible evidence became a form of resistance, an assertion that facts still matter and can shape the outcome of a debate. Crockett's conduct challenged others to follow suit, demonstrating that respectful, evidence-based exchanges are not only possible but essential for a healthier political environment. Reflecting on this, it becomes evident that the evolution of this confrontation signaled a potential turning point. It offered hope that future conversations might be less about sensationalism and more about genuine understanding. The transformation was not just about one formal debate, but about a possibility, a glimpse into a political culture where substance could triumph over spectacle, and where credibility could ultimately prevail over noise. This example serves as a reminder that in the realm of public discourse, the most compelling responses to relentless insults and provocative tactics are often rooted in the strength of one's arguments, supported by reliable evidence. When individuals choose to produce and highlight their receipts, be it legal proof, documented facts, or well-reasoned arguments, they elevate the level of discussion, encouraging others to do the same. Such moments reinforce the idea that, despite the chaos and chaos-mongering that often characterizes politics, there is still room for rational, respectful, and fact-based debate. If this analysis of how Jasmine Crockett's approach became a catalyst for a more substantive dialogue resonated with you, it's worth recognizing the importance of these instances in shaping the future of political conversations. The hope remains that such examples inspire others not to be swayed by volume and theatrics, but to prioritize truth and expertise. The ongoing challenge is to foster a culture where facts are valued more than fleeting sensationalism, where honesty is applauded rather than mocked, and where vigorous, respectful debate becomes the norm rather than the exception. Who else would you like us to analyze in future discussions? Which figures or situations do you believe could benefit from a similar breakdown of their approach to public discourse? Please share your thoughts and suggestions below. Through detailed analysis and thoughtful presentation, we aim to highlight moments where substance triumphs and to promote a higher standard in political communication, one rooted in facts, respect, and meaningful engagement.